Daily news and analysis. We keep you informed and inspired.
This is World Today.
Foreign officials and business leaders see AI opportunities with China at a mega AI conference. China rejects US President Donald Trump's election interference accusations. And Shanghai's economy showed strong growth in the first half of the year. Hello and welcome to World Today. I'm Do Hongyu in Beijing. To listen to this episode again or to catch up on previous episodes, you can download our podcast by searching World Today. Our first story. Artificial intelligence is no longer just a technological race. It's increasingly becoming a platform for international cooperation. At this year's World AI Conference and high-level meeting on global AI governance in Shanghai, over 1,100 companies from around the world have showcased their latest innovations, while government officials and business leaders have explored new partnerships with China. From AI-powered weather forecasting to joint research, startup collaboration, and industrial applications, the conference highlights China's growing role in the global AI ecosystem. So what is driving this international interest, and what does it tell us about the future of AI collaboration? My colleague Zhao Yang spoke with Yan Liang, professor of economics at Willamette University.
Well, Professor Yan Liang, thank you very much for joining us. This year's World AI Conference has attracted government leaders and officials, global CEOs, and startups from around the world. So what does this tell us about China's position in the global AI landscape today?
Well, I think China is increasingly taking this leading role in developing AI technologies and also really integrating AI into the real world. It also demonstrates China's increasing important role in leading global governance framework. So at this conference, we know there are over 1,100 exhibitors and over 300 products made their global debut. And I think what is most interesting is China is showcasing its complete AI ecosystem. So there are, chips and computer infrastructures that are being demonstrated. There are also large language models that really becoming the sort of the top of these language models like the Kimi K3. And there are also many humanoid robots and other embodied AI that are being showcased. It really showed that AI can be integrated into manufacturing, logistics, services, and scientific research. So in other words, I think what China is showcasing is a transition that it's not just about what AI can do, but really how AI can deliver value, how AI can be used to upgrade manufacturing, advance research, support the real economy. And finally, I think many of the global leaders are also really interested in terms of China's governance framework and how China can lead the world to have more discussions about data security, digital identity, private protection, and also, most importantly, utilize AI for all and for good, for development and really for the people's benefits, rather than generating benefits just for a few big monopolies.
And China has increasingly embraced the open source AI. So why do you think are Chinese companies choosing the open source path? And what does it mean for the innovation, competition, and AI governance worldwide?
Well, I think the open source models and open weight models for Chinese companies, this is a sort of win-win. It's a win-win situation. It's a win-win path. So on the one hand, by making your source codes open or your weight open, it allowed other developers to be able to adapt a model and continue to develop the model. They can download and you can customize, they can run locally. So this would allow, Chinese models to attract more users and to be able to catch more market share. So I think this is a great market strategy for them. But in the meantime, I think it also helped to trigger a global network of innovators and developers, because once the source code and the weight are available, there are many developers will utilize these models and they will continue to innovate and develop these models. They'll be able to fix any bugs there might be and continue to improve functionalities of these models. So in that sense, I think open model is good for the Chinese developers. On the other hand, I think it is, of course, very good for all the users, because the open source helped lower the costs of using these models and significantly lower the barriers of the users. So as we know, compared to the Western large language models that use the closed source models, China's model is able to bring the cost down in terms of token inputs and output by somewhere between 60 to 90%. So that's why you also saw many of the Western developers, they route their tokens to China's open model, the open source model. So I think that really showcased the open source model. It creates a win-win situation. The Chinese developers gets the market, gets more developers, technological innovations, and the users getting a cheaper, more accessible, and high quality models to use. So I think that is really what China's advantages is.
And AI governance is a major theme at this year's conference. Chinese President Xi Jinping has delivered a keynote speech at the opening ceremony. He placed in context why it is so important that everybody has access to new AI technologies. He said that China will ensure equitable access to AI to all countries. So what concrete steps need to be taken to narrow the global digital gap?
Right. So we know the digital or the AI gap is widening. Most of the AI developments and also uses are in the global north countries. There's very little benefits now are spreading to the global south countries. That's because many of these AI development concentrate in the global north countries and China, of course. Moreover, I think that AI development itself is very limited to the global north countries, from the chips to the infrastructure to the user cases. They're all focused more on north countries, not the south countries. So I think with this gap, there are a lot to be done. For China, in terms of technology development, I think China is really trying to enable the global south countries to be able to not only use AI, but also develop AI and bring them into the development system. So for example, China's open source AI model, as we just mentioned, it allowed the global south countries to be priced in. So they're able to adapt the AI models to fit their local culture, their language, their needs. And I think that is a tremendous improvement for their access to AI. China also is building infrastructure when it comes to, for example, computing infrastructure. Chinese companies are building fiber optic cables overseas. China is also laying over 1.9 million 5G stations in the global south countries. China is training workers to be able to utilize AI. Lastly, I think when it comes to governance, I think China is, making the efforts to try to make the governance structure a lot more inclusive, including, the Global South Voice. At this meeting, establishing a World Artificial Intelligence Cooperation Organization, the so-called WICO, to include the Global South Voice into the rulemaking process.
And President Xi also said that AI development should not be a solo performance by a single country, but a symphony of global collaboration. He said we should jointly oppose overstretching the national security concept in the fields of AI or placing one country's security over that of others. So how important is that, especially when we see the rising geopolitical tensions today?
Yeah, I think this is really critical because I think we know that AI is a general purpose technologies. And in fact, in the speech, President likened AI as the electricity or the steam engine. So this kinds of technology promises a next, sort of the technological revolution that would transform the global economy and society. So that's why it's important to build AI as an inclusive technology, so then countries can all share the benefits instead of, having a few countries to monopolize the technology. For China, the stance has been clear. Since 2023, President Xi already bring up this idea of the global AI governance initiative to make AI for good and for all. So I think this is clear demonstration that China, it wants to make AI a more inclusive technology and really help to transform the global economy, not just for the benefits of a few companies and countries.
And China will also provide developing countries with 5,000 opportunities for AI training in the next 5 years. So how will this help to build their own AI capacity?
Right. So I think in terms of the human talents, this is really the most essential ingredient to develop an AI ecosystem. So as we mentioned earlier, in terms of the AI gap, developing South countries is really lacking a lot of these human talent to both utilize AI and also to develop AI. On the other hand, China has over 50% of the global AI talents. And China has, leading AI models and now leading applications of AIs when it comes to embodied AI. So in this sense, I think China is in a great position to help the global South countries to catch up on that AI talent gap. And I think that, as we mentioned earlier, China is building, both the hard infrastructure, right, when it comes to cables, 5G stations, electricity grid, and so on and so forth. But I think in this case, China is also helping to build the software in terms of cultivating human talent for the global South country. So I think this is a holistic approach to help the global South countries to bridge the AI gap and to really be included into the global AI development ecosystem.
And as you mentioned, 29 countries signed agreement on establishing the World AI Cooperation Organization. So what will this organization do? And will it give developing countries a greater voice in shaping the future of AI?
I think so. So I think this particular organization is really trying to build a more inclusive and shared governance platform. We know, for example, the T20, which is a think tank organization for the G20, last year they published a report and said basically 90% of the AI rules are made in the global north. So the global south has very little voice in terms of the AI governance structure. And the global north definitely have different concerns about AI governance. So that's why I think this organization is trying to bring more global voice to the table. So it will become a regulatory incubator. So invite global South countries to jointly write AI rules and also to discuss and negotiate what kind of rules should be applied universally or selectively. So I think this is very important as improvement in the inclusive shared governance structure of AI. And as you mentioned, 29 countries have signed, including some of the most, the largest emerging markets like Indonesia, Brazil, Pakistan, and so on. So I think it's very important to see the next step. This organization will be able to put concrete steps to develop the AI governance framework.
That was Yan Liang, professor of economics at Willamette University. Coming up, China rejects U.S. President Donald Trump's election interference accusations. This is World Today. Stay tuned. China has rejected U.S. President Donald Trump's claim that Beijing interfered in the 2020 presidential election, calling it baseless and a malicious smear. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian said China has never interfered in American elections and has no interest in doing so.
The relevant claims made by the U.S. side are pure fabrications and malicious smears, claims that have long been proven baseless. China consistently upholds the principle of non-interference in other countries' internal affairs. We have no interest in the U.S. election and have never interfered in it.
Lin urged Washington to stop using China as a political issue and take steps to improve bilateral relations. Meanwhile, U.S. media outlet CBS News, quoting a U.S. intelligence community assessment, reported that there's no evidence that China or any other foreign country attempted to manipulate the outcome of the 2020 election. For more, we're joined by Wang Xingsong, Associate Professor at the School of Government with Beijing Normal University. So thank you very much for joining us, Professor. President Trump has claimed that China interfered in the 2020 U.S. presidential election, but Beijing has dismissed the allegation as baseless. So from your perspective, why has this issue resurfaced now?
Well, I think this issue has surfaced now mainly because of the elections coming up in November in the U.S. So this is more about domestic politics in the U.S. And it's groundless, obviously. There's no fact provided, and China did not interfere in the 2020 U.S. elections. And I think President Trump has long challenged the legitimacy of the 2020 election. And linking that argument to China gives the claim a foreign policy dimension. And it is also politically useful to turn on an old domestic dispute into a national security issue, especially ahead of another election cycle in November. And given that Trump's public poll is not looking quite well, and many of the Republican Party candidates in the upcoming election are being very cautious. So from the domestic political point of view for Trump, he wanted to use this issue to boost up the poll at the November election.
The U.S. intelligence community admitted there's no solid evidence proving China interfered in the 2020 U.S. presidential election. How would you explain the apparent gap between the intelligence findings and President Trump's claim?
Well, that gap reflects the difference between intelligence assessment and political messaging. And the U.S. intelligence community's 2021 assessment not only said that China did not deploy interference efforts intended to change the outcome of the 2020 election, but also said that there were no indications that any foreign actor altered the technical aspects of the voting process, such as voter registration, ballot casting, or tabulation, and etc. So the claim that China changing votes in the 2020 election is ungrounded, according to the intelligence agencies. And by the way, the intelligence agencies speak usually based on evidence thresholds. But then when it comes to politicians, they tend to speak in simplified and emotional tones, sometimes exaggerating, sometimes even fabricating, based on bits of information from intelligence reports. So that is why this issue of foreign threats to elections always surfaces, especially before elections, because it can produce that sort of public messages useful for the candidates. So this apparent gap is not hard to understand because the intelligence record is very cautious as well. The political claim is rather broader and more dramatic.
And this is not the first time, because in 2024, the then U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken claimed that China was attempting to influence and interfere in the U.S. presidential election, but no conclusive public evidence was presented. So in your opinion, why do U.S. politicians tend to hype up China-related issues during their domestic election cycles?
Well, China is one of the few issues right now in U.S. politics where there is a strong bipartisan pressure to appear tough. And Democrats and Republicans disagree on many, many things, but both sides fear being seen as weak on China issues. So during election cycles, candidates often use China-related issues to show strength, patriotism, and national security seriousness. And another thing is that China is a very easy way to connect different voter anxieties or the issues that are very much concerned by voters. So if voters worry about losing manufacturing jobs, inflation, supply chains, technology, computation, and even national decline, if they worry about those issues, then politicians can easily connect many of those issues with China. So China often becomes a political shortcut for explaining very complex domestic problems. And then blaming an external actor can also help politicians avoid very hard domestic discussion, right? Because everything is attributed to a foreign player rather than to politicians themselves. So there's no doubt that the election distrust in the United States is driven by issues like polarization, partisan media, institutional mistrust, social media, and so on and so forth. But blaming China can always make this issue appear rather simple. The problem is outside interference rather than domestic division.
Then how will such accusations from the U.S. harm the atmosphere and practical communication of bilateral China-U.S. relations?
I think definitely there's going to be damage to the atmosphere of China-U.S. relations in several ways. One is that such accusations do deepen mistrust. This is based on the fact that China and US are already having distrust issues or trust issues, right? So China sees such claims as groundless accusations and as an attempt to vilify China or demonize China for domestic political purposes. And when one side believes the other is using it as a political scapegoat, then it becomes harder to maintain a constructive tone. Second is that the accusations make practical communication even more difficult. China and US already have difficult issues to manage, like tariffs, technology control, AI safety, climate, you name it. Right? If accusations like this dominate the public narrative, then they're crowding out more practical channels of cooperation. And the third is that accusations also create domestic political constraints, because once China is accused of such interference, then American politicians may find it harder to support dialogue or compromise with China. And lastly, I think it could also affect leader-level diplomacy. If the two sides are still preparing for a potential upcoming meeting in the fall of this year, then such accusation is certainly going to create political noise and increase the risk of misunderstanding.
Then from China's side, this country has repeatedly stressed that it adheres to the principle of non-interference in other countries' internal affairs. How would you assess the significance of this principle in China's foreign policy?
Well, non-interference is one of the most important principles in China's foreign policy. It reflects China's long-standing emphasis on sovereignty, territorial integrity, and respect for each other's rights to choose its own political system and development path. And historically, this principle comes from China's own experience with foreign intervention and external pressure. So in Chinese diplomatic thinking, sovereignty is tied to national dignity, independence, and the ability of countries to manage their own affairs. In today's world, this principle is especially relevant because many countries worry about regime change politics, sanctions, military interventions, interference through media. So China presents non-interference as a safeguard for international equality, especially for smaller and developing countries. Now, back to the US election issue. China's position is that it has no interest in interfering in the US elections and has never done so. And underlying it, interfering in US election is against the very principle that's very central to China's foreign policy.
And finally, Professor, do you think similar election-related China-bashing remarks will continue to appear in future American political competitions? And how should China respond steadily in the long run?
Well, absolutely, yes. I think similar China-bashing remarks will continue in the future, and especially during election cycles. And US-China competition, like I said earlier, is one of the central themes in American foreign policy and domestic politics. It rewards candidates who appear to be tough on China. So, the issue is rather structural. So China should expect this pattern to continue, especially during the election seasons. And we have seen this before, and we'll see more accusations about elections, technology, fentanyl, human rights, supply chains, and so on and so forth. Many of these issues involve political framing, like I said, and which is oftentimes exaggerated. And I think the best long-term response from China should be steady and restrained, because once China understands this election cycle and election campaign thing in U.S. politics, it should keep more calm when confronted with such issues. This is not to say China accepts everything. Of course, China should reject baseless allegations very, very clearly, but at the same time, avoid overreacting emotionally. Also, China should keep the communication channels open, because even when accusations arise, the two countries still need to manage many of the issues like trade, security, and AI. And lastly, I think it's important that China needs to continue to explain its position to the wider international audience and community, because it's not only to answer Washington, it's also to prevent the US domestic political narratives from defining the global understanding of China.
Thank you very much. That was Wang Xingsong, Associate Professor with the School of Government at Beijing Normal University. You're listening to World Today. We'll be back after a short break.
Hello, my name is Alessandro Golombiewski Teixeira. I'm a professor of public policy and management at Tsinghua University in Beijing. I am a great listener of The World Today. In my opinion, The World Today is one of the best China radio programs. In The World Today, we can get the best news and analysis in what is happening now in the world. So please come to join us.
You're listening to World Today with me, Do Hongyu, in Beijing. Shanghai's GDP grew 5.6% year-on-year in the first half of 2026, reaching about 2.8 trillion yuan or $412 billion. The growth rate is not only higher than the national average of 4.7%, but also exceeds Shanghai's annual GDP growth in 2024 and 25. The tertiary industry saw its half-year added value surge 5.9% on a yearly basis to over 2.2 trillion yuan, consolidating its role as a major economic driver for Shanghai. The information transmission, software, and information technology services sector has become a major highlight with a growth rate of 9.1%. The performance was supported by the strong growth in subsectors such as artificial intelligence, integrated circuit design, and platform enterprises. For more, we're joined by Dr. Zhou Mi, a senior research fellow with the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation. Thank you very much for joining us. Shanghai's economic growth outperformed the national average and its own recent growth rates. What do you see as the key drivers behind this stronger than expected performance?
Well, I think that Shanghai's economy's development is strengthened in this year, the first half of this year. So the drivers may lie in different dimensions. First of all, Shanghai is very open. So they are able to use its advantages as free trade zones and trying to have a better openness. So the openness has attracted so many different peoples from different countries. They could come to Shanghai and invest there. And to support this development, Shanghai has performed some kind of institutional openness, trying to have a better policies to give a better expectations and certainty of the policies. And the second reason is that Shanghai is also a center for financial centers. So they are creating better opportunities to not just trying to attract the investment, but also trying to make that financial flows to be used in a better way. And Shanghai also have many kind of cooperation with surrounding provinces, including Zhejiang and Jiangsu. So the lower Yangtze River Delta is having a better integration. In this regard, I think that there are better usage of the resources, and that is also one of the reasons why Shanghai keep on improving. Well, the third one, I would believe that is coming from the domestic consumption in Shanghai. The people are having better income, so it is possible for them to consume more products and services. So that is giving Shanghai more momentums for development.
One of the standout performers was the information technology sector, which expanded by over 9%. How important are industries such as artificial intelligence and integrated circuit design to Shanghai's long-term growth strategy?
Well, Shanghai has just held the WIC, the important artificial intelligence forum for the discussion. I think that it has attracted so many people from many countries. They come here to sign the MOU and also trying to be involved in this new established international organization. So for Shanghai, I think that they are really trying to provide a wide range of scenarios for using of the artificial intelligence. Shanghai is our leading city in China for the talented peoples in the artificial intelligence and also in many things to do with the chips, building and designing. So when we are talking about that, I think that we need to mention that the United States is pushing China in that regard. and they are not just trying to let China to produce our own chips. So Shanghai is playing a very important role in supporting this kind of development from domestic industries. So we know that several companies are able to produce chips, and they are having a better support for many companies, including the mobiles and also the laptops or computing. I mean, for those companies, they are able to try to find some alternative supply from Shanghai. And for artificial intelligence, it's not only about the producing of the hardware, it is also having a lot of relations with software and the solutions. So Shanghai is able to attract more people, and I mean the ecosystem is better supporting Shanghai in developing a much quicker speed.
Shanghai has also been positioning itself as an international center for innovation. So, do you think its investments in emerging technologies are beginning to pay off?
Definitely, I have found that this development of the third industry or third tier industries are overpaced. Even the general development of the GDP in the first half of the year in Shanghai. So it means that innovation factors are able to inject more resources for the development. Innovation is not just for, if you can do it just overnight, you will get the benefit. It has to be related with longer term of development. So, like in Shanghai, the pharmaceutical sector, as one example, Shanghai has a lot of companies who are dealing with these medicines. So they have put a lot of money in this regard and trying to create enough data to support the new medicines and also something to do with medical care. So that's the reason why if you're looking at China's development for those innovative medicines, you can find that there are outbursts of these the kinds of the new medicines. And I think that many of these corporations are already happening. And Chinese companies are giving the intellectual properties to the foreign partners. So in this regard, I think that innovation has just came into our very good cycles of development from the investment or research to the profits phase. I think that Shanghai has already started to benefit from this development and the innovation.
Shanghai is viewed as a leader in China in many aspects, as you said. To what extent do Shanghai's growth reflect broader trends across the country, and where does Shanghai stand out?
From the history, we know that Shanghai is a leading part or leading cities in China to open to the outside world. And we know that Pudong is a very important experiment areas for Shanghai to gain its momentum, like in the financial sectors or something to do with artificial intelligence. So many other cities in China also trying to do the similar things. Maybe they are not just following exactly the same path as Shanghai has followed. I think that they are trying to make the better use of their resources, specific resources, like from geopolitical locations or kind of companies or sectors or even resources. So Shanghai's successful stories has encouraged many cities to trying to develop their own businesses. I mean, these corporations are not just just by themselves. I think that there are more and more inter-regional or intra-regional corporations in China, and the corporations are giving a better support for those cities or regions to have a sustainable development, even when they are facing many challenges, like from the international trade.
Now, global economic uncertainty remains a challenge with trade tensions and slowing demand in some overseas markets. So, how important is Shanghai's growth in that international context?
I would say that in such an uncertain world, what the world need most is certainty. While Shanghai's development is giving us more confidence, even when the external market is fluctuating, when they are having so many protectionism, we can try to dig up deeper and try to find out the space, not just depending too much on the external market. So Shanghai story has showed that we can do it. I mean, when we're trying to discuss the development, many people in the country, in other countries, believe that they are able to control the resources, and that is the reason why they keep on their space for the development. But I think that Shanghai has gave us some different thought on that. We can try to find some alternative ways. We can use more innovative resources and try to have a much more different ways for development. And that way maybe not as easy as traditional ways, but they will give us some new momentum or new forces for development. Shanghai story also tell us that we can do more by the better integration. That's the reason why we are going to support the domestic unified market. That is also one of our priorities for this year. And the consumptions are really playing an important role. So the income of the people living in Shanghai, they have a much higher income compared with some other cities in the middle and the west. So that is the reason why more talents will trying to go to Shanghai to find jobs. I mean, not just from China, but also from other countries. They come here to have a better work experiences, and they are also giving our better support for the two-way communications.
That was Dr. Zhou Mi, a senior research fellow with the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation. Coming up, Andy Burnham becomes Britain's new Prime Minister. This is World Today. We'll be back. Britain's new Prime Minister Andy Burnham has pledged to boost economic growth, improve public services, and rebuild trust in politics. The new Labour leader takes offices as Britain grapples with weak economic growth, mounting pressure on public services, and declining public confidence in government. The former mayor of Greater Manchester secured the backing of over 85% of Labour lawmakers to become the party's new leader. He was the sole candidate to succeed outgoing Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who announced his resignation last month. For more, Lian Qingxuan spoke with Mike Baston, a senior lecturer at the University of Southampton.
Burnham has outlined a broad domestic reform agenda. Compared with the Starmer government, how do you expect Burnham's governing philosophy and domestic priorities to differ? And which of his priorities do you think will be the most challenging to deliver?
Well, certainly it remains to be seen. He's taken office today, and he has quite deliberately not provided too much detail, but broadly, it does appear that his philosophy will focus very much on regional devolution, particularly to the north, number 10 in Manchester, and empowering other regions around the country, national transformation. He appears to be open to working with other parties more than his predecessor. In terms of specific policies, he's made it very clear that control of public utilities, particularly water, is a priority, particularly Thames Water. He's scrapping ID cards that the previous Prime Minister had planned as expensive and unnecessary. He's sticking with Shabana Mahmood's immigration plans. So there's a combination, really, but he certainly sees himself as a champion of the people and national transformation and rejuvenating poorer parts of the country through devolution and regional empowerment. That's a big difference.
One of Burnham's signature proposals is to devolve more powers away from London and establish a northern number 10 in Manchester. So why has decentralization become a central part of his agenda?
Well, I think quite a few people see that it's almost an over-centralized state, and the central government are out of touch with problems which are different in different parts of the country. And obviously his experience as mayor of Manchester will serve him quite well here and the progress he made. So I think it's just seen as very necessary to empower local areas, particularly Manchester as perhaps a hub for northern reindustrialization. That's going to be more effective than perhaps an overarching, overbearing, centralized government that is out of touch with these local areas. So I think it makes sense on paper, but as yet we do need to see much more detail and how he's actually going to finance this. We're all waiting for much more detail, which hopefully will come this week.
And Burnham has also pledged to work with other parties while maintaining Labour's own political identity. So how difficult will it be to strike that balance?
again, that needs to be seen. What does he actually mean by that? You'd automatically assume that means working closer with the Liberal Democrats, their leader, and their focus, and they've welcomed a closer working relationship, particularly one that focuses on NHS funding and social care. And Burnham has made social care a key pillar of his administration, a real focus that we should see a lot more on. So perhaps working more closely with the Liberal Democrats. It's hard to see where working relationships can improve elsewhere, particularly with the Conservatives, possibly on immigration, possibly on trade. But certainly it's a very open gesture. And perhaps there is a need for such a working relationship across the centre and centre-left parties.
Burnham has pledged to strengthen public services, including healthcare and social care. So what are the most urgent challenges facing Britain's public services, and where is reform needed most?
Well, he's outlined several things, and let's not forget when he was in government in 2009, he proposed various initiatives where, when it came to social care, in terms of inheritance tax, progressive care levy, to fund some sort of national care service. He's pledged a fairly ambitious council house building program, again, to help poorer families with affordable accommodation, and the argument being that those have been hived off by perhaps voracious private landlords. So certainly when it comes to housing and social care and welfare, he certainly made it a very, very central pillar of his focus under his leadership.
On foreign and trade policy, how do you expect the new government to balance its relationships with the United States, Europe, and other major economies?
Well, he's made it very clear that he's very frank, very sort of down-to-earth, matter-of-fact person with a very direct approach, no airs and graces, and he thinks the current president of the US likes people like that, even if he doesn't agree with them. He values that approach, so he thinks that will work very, very well, and possibly with our European trading partners as well. It'd be very interesting to see negotiations on closer trading relationships with the EU, probably not going for immediate sort of membership of the single European market, but certainly working towards that. And I think that's something we should see more of over the next year or two, and a recognition that we do need to be part of that, and that's our major trader partner. So again, he's a very, very open person, very direct person, and that should work well.
And from China's perspective, what new variables could the Burnham government bring to China and UK relations? Do you expect any meaningful changes in the overall direction of the bilateral relationship?
I think it'll be positive. Let's remember, Burnham has always been very pro-business, and with his northern background and the Manchester background, Manchester's famous for entrepreneurial endeavor, the cotton mills, the Manchester Ship Canal. So he's very, very pro-business. He realizes that the private sector has a key role to play in the national economy, the national well-being. So I think that's very, very positive. So I think he'll be very open to negotiation and a very, very positive exchange and a very, very strong relationship with China and other possible trading partners. So let's not assume anything. So if we do hear public control and renationalization, let's look at the detail. I suspect there'll still be a very important role for private business, international business as well. He is very, very pro-business, which is a very, very good thing.
The UK has recently nationalized British Steel after taking control of the Chinese-owned company last year. So do you expect Burnham to continue this approach toward strategically important industries?
Well, he certainly highlighted this as part of his policy, so more control over public utilities. Whether that means actual ownership or partial ownership remains to be seen. I suspect he will be very reticent to actually plow in there and retake and take over from private companies. And what they've done with British Steel, I think, is something they really need to think about and rethink. Thames Water he's mentioned as an area where he really feels very strongly that there needs to be more public control. So again, we need to see the detail. Does that mean ownership, partial ownership? I suspect there'll be a public-private partnership. So there'll be more control, and the argument will be that we're doing this for the British people. There's no real competition here. But again, we need to see more detail. I don't think there'll be wholesale renationalisation. Going back to the 1970s, I think he'll think very carefully about that and proceed very gradually.
That was Mike Baston with the University of Southampton. This is World Today. Stay tuned.
Welcome. I am Chu Zhang, Deputy Director at the Center for Middle Eastern Studies at Fudan University. On the World Today program, we will dive beyond the headlines to uncover the stories, trends, and impacts that connect states across the globe. Join me on World Today.
Welcome back. After 104 matches in over 39 days, the FIFA World Cup has come to an end, with Spain beating Argentina 1-0 in the final. The European champions dominated the contest, but did not get rewarded for their efforts within regulation time. Substitute Ferran Torres scored just 37 seconds into the second half of extra time, thanks to a link-up between Nico Williams and Pedro Porro. This year's tournament is said to be remembered for incredible plays and record-breaking goals, as well as for controversies off the pitch. For more, we're joined by my colleague Yang Guang, host of sports podcast Sideline Story. Thank you for joining us, Yang Guang.
No problem. Glad to be here.
Did you expect Spain to lift the trophy? Was this result surprising to you?
Yes and no. Yes, because Spain were the heavy favorites before the tournament. Their World Cup campaign followed a successful European Championship run. They had winning formula and just needed to keep playing that. On paper, they have one of the best, if not the best, right winger in Lamine Yamal. Their captain Rodri was the Ballon d'Or winner. And no, because their opening game was a disaster. Let's say a goalless draw with Cape Verde, a World Cup debutant. That result had everyone second-guessing them, me included. But I guess the opening draw was, to some extent, a good thing for them. It's a big wake-up call. They found what could go wrong in offense and started fixing the problems in the early part of the tournament. And it paid off. After that, they've been quite flawless.
Then what impressed you most about Spain's performance throughout the tournament, and what made them worthy champions?
Wow, so many things. I mean, their control in midfield was unchallengeable. Their coordination on the pitch was on another level, I would say. And coach Luis de la Fuente was bold and creative. He actually benched Pedri, one of the best midfielders in the world, throughout the tournament. That decision alone takes guts. But what made this team truly terrifying was their high-pressing defense. From the opening whistle against Argentina in the final, Spain pushed high, maintained possession, and systematically shut down every attacking option. Argentina simply couldn't get the ball past the midfield. Passes aimed at their attackers in front were intercepted early. Long balls to escape the pressure. Spain controlled the second ball and pushed them right back into their own half. Almost the same script unfolded in the semi-final against France, a team boasting the World Cup's top scorer and top assister. Spain conceded just one single goal for this World Cup, and they never trailed for even a second in the entire tournament. Their final opponent, Argentina, recorded 0 shots until late in the extra time. The stats tell everything.
Argentina fell just short of defending their title. So looking back, where do you think the final was won and lost?
Oh, I would say the midfield. Argentina couldn't match Spain's midfielders. Again, Spain's high pressing was just suffocating. It's like the Argentinians were never able to safely control the ball at their feet, even for a second. They had no time to lift head and find a teammate, because the next second they would be surrounded by red shirts. On the other hand, Spain's passes around middle area looked so easy. Rodri played a key role there. He always knew where to put the ball to and never panicked when the opponents got near him. Spain could get through the midfield with some one-touch passes, but Argentina couldn't. So this is the biggest gap between these two teams. As the saying goes, whoever controls the midfield wins the game. It was perfectly reflected in this final.
Now, looking at this whole tournament, this was the first 48-team World Cup featuring 104 matches over 39 days. Did the expanded format ultimately make the tournament better, or did it create too many challenges for players, organizers, and fans?
Yes, the first 48-team World Cup was a tournament of stark contrasts. On the plus side, expansion gave debutants like Cape Verde, countries who would have had little chance of reaching this stage, a historic platform to shine. We also witnessed a record-breaking goal tally, complete with sensational upsets and dramatic late winners, which generated narratives that previous tournaments couldn't match. Yet, the new format came with clear trade-offs. With 8 best third-placed teams advancing, group stage tension often felt diluted, replaced by cautious, calculated matches where sides played for safe passage rather than all-out victory. Eventually, only one of the 8 best third-place teams progressed into the last 16. Meantime, semifinals were again dominated by the world's traditional top 4 powers, England, Argentina, France, Spain, which proved that the elite order remains intact. While the expanded tournament offered more global representation and memorable underdog stories, it also raised questions about competitive integrity and match quality. Nevertheless, on balance, this experiment lands as, I would say, a successful launch, and I believe 2026 will go down as the dawn of a new World Cup era.
The World Cup was also overshadowed by controversies, from refereeing debates to ticket prices. Which controversy do you think had the biggest impact on the tournament's legacy, and why?
Well, there never lacks controversies in World Cups, but if there's one that made the most complaints from this World Cup, it must be the hydration breaks from my perspective. We've seen referees pause play for the athletes to drink water in the matches, which brings a mandatory stoppage and inevitably a flood of courtside commercials. On one hand, protecting players, of course, from extreme heat and humidity is absolutely non-negotiable for player safety. But on the other hand, stopping the flow of live action for sponsored timeouts feels, I would say, unfootball-like. This has been complained about by players, coaches, and some pundits as well. The hydration breaks literally became tactical timeouts as well, which interrupted the game flow. The momentum of the game can't be kept. We've seen teams score goals immediately after these breaks. And for fans, the breaks would tend to drag their emotion and game mood away from the pitch to the commercials. I'm not sure this arrangement would be kept in the future World Cups.
Now that the final whistle has blown, what do you think will be the lasting legacy of the 2026 World Cup? Maybe for football, for FIFA, and for future tournaments?
Quite obviously, the 48-team expansion, this is a great experiment, but it's more than that. Remember, it's also the first time that 3 countries have co-hosted a World Cup. Before the tournament, we might have had some questions if 3 co-hosts can manage a single event. Now, I guess it's safe to say in terms of logistics, transportation, like accommodation, the 3 nations set a good example how it could be done. The next World Cup will also have 3 host countries, Spain, Portugal, and Morocco. I think this edition has offered them a very good lesson.
Thank you very much. That was my colleague Yang Guang. And that's all for this edition of World Today. I'm Do Hongyu in Beijing. Thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.